consulting firm and internet service provider based in Camden, Maryland. He is a values-based systems engineer whose professional work includes a wide range of robotic, space, and computer systems engineering projects. Over the last 32 years, he has been extensively involved in the space advocacy community as a co-founder and executive director of the Maryland Alliance for Space Colonization, and one of the most successful chapters of the L5 Society. He's also founder and executive director of the Space Development Foundation, a frequent public speaker on space advocacy issues, an organizer of space-related educational programs, and a participant in many other space advocacy organization activities. Mr. Barnhard received a BS in engineering from the University of Maryland. So I'd like to introduce Gary Barnhard.
Appreciate the opportunity to talk. It's somewhat ironic. I got my start with respect to space advocacy in high school in 1976 after reading an article by the name of Dr. Gerard K. O'Neill. He was written in Physics Today. It was examining as to whether or not the surface of the planet was necessarily the right place for a technological civilization to thrive and prosper. One of the original space colonization article in that particular era that proved quite seminal. But what proved curious is there's a little footnote about something called the L5 Society, a little organization that had been founded in Tucson, Arizona, of all places, that was advocating the idea that providing for space development, space settlements, space colonization might be a very powerful variable that could alter the future that may come to pass. I wrote a letter to the folks that were in charge at the time, asking about where I could talk to in Washington that would be so that I could get involved in society. I got a nice note back from the person in charge at the time, Carolyn Henson, who said there's a Russian co-ed in New Jersey that I could speak to. And I wrote back saying, I'm sorry, if we're going to be doing this for real, you're going to have a presence in Washington. And that led to the founding of the Maryland Alliance for Space Colonization at the University of Maryland in 1977. Sort of like that country song about a boy named Sue. To give you an idea, at that point in time, the advocacy groups that were preeminent in space included, amongst other things, the National Space Institute, precursors to NSS, in which the forward-looking space program being advocated was better weather satellites. The construction of the space shuttle had effectively eaten NASA's budget, and there was, with the winding down of the Apollo program, an extraordinarily difficult budgetary environment. And the notion that you start talking about things like space settlements and space colonization was fairly radical. So, with a name like MASC, after you say that to somebody, you have their attention, albeit for about 60 seconds. What you did with it, was an interesting question. What we discovered, though, was that it was a bit of a game changer, in that a lot of people ended up listening and finding something to the discussion. And as for me, it ended up leading on to a career as a robotic space systems engineer. At the time, we couldn't even really get a degree in robotics. What I did is I combined aerospace with structures orientation, material science, graduate work in advanced computer analysis, knowledge-based systems, and computational methods. What is a robot? It's a controls problem, a structures problem, a materials problem. It's an interesting programming. So that's how we got started. But what I wanted to talk to you folks today about is really the sort of connection between SEDS and the path forward with the National Space Society, and in general with respect to space advocacy. This is, by the way, these charts are up on the wiki. They'll be available. And you'll notice as we go on, in a lot of cases, we put URLs, everything on them. In terms of where we stand, the future that we would like to see come to pass is not a sure thing. Whether or not You buy into the notion of Star Trek re-envisioned, or previous incarnations, or the 2001, 2010, 2062 notion. What this whole idea of space, us extending our economic sphere out into the solar system. Whereas for many people, it is certainly plausible. It involves accepting some number of impossible things before breakfast. How do we get from where we are right now on a day-to-day basis, dealing with the problems of the moment, to how this happens? And what you'll discover is that even if folks think it's a reasonable thing, they don't necessarily make the connection between what's going on now that's going to lead to that. And whether or not it comes from indifference or comes from a lack of information, or just feeling that they don't necessarily have any leverage in terms of what they can do to make a difference in it. It is to be recognized that it isn't the sure thing. Strangely enough, the folks in charge actually have more of a clue than you think. Starting off with things like NSS, you could basically write me off as a stuffed shirt that doesn't have a clue and is just sitting there giving you a pre-canned speech, but you're going to make sure by the end of this discussion that I'm not that. You could say, well, the folks at NASA headquarters, they don't have a clue either, but let's see here. The administrators, been an astronaut, been involved in multiple levels throughout the agency in terms of making things happen. The deputy administrator, Gary Barnhard, past executive director of the National Space Society, and has been involved in many aspects of space advocacy. How about the chief of staff, George Whitesides, past executive director of the National Space Society? I'm sorry, the folks in charge these days, in a sense, are us. Okay, we're in a situation where it's put up or shut up time. If we cannot go through and let our efforts to making to see the future come to pass now, things get to know. And even the president and more broadly the executive branch is not necessarily asleep at the wheel on this. Had an opportunity to talk with Jeff Greason, one of the participants in the Human Spaceflight Commission report. You may have hopefully all crossed paths with at some level. The URL is be in the presentation later on. And he was basically describing what his experience was, joining up with the committee and participating in it. And he said, what really struck me is that I realized that the rest of the folks associated with the committee, of which he considered himself the youngin in the group, all actually did understand why they were there. That this really was about providing for space development and space settlement, and that's really the business. So, if you haven't read that report yet, please do so. This notion that perhaps some of the characters involved might have some notion of a clue is something to explore. Now, there are a few other pieces to this puzzle which make for what I'm referring to as the perfect storm, if you will. What's happening with respect to government space endeavors, is in play per the Human Spaceflight Commission report. It's not clear, how the next administration is going to embrace the the evolution of the vision for space exploration in U.S. national space policy. The notion of commercial activities. We have seen launches of the Falcon with SpaceX. Rumor has it that something may be happening in the not too distant future from Virgin Galactic that could be making some press. From the standpoint of other non-governmental organizations that are getting involved, there's different entrepreneurs that have gone and decided that they're going to pursue initiatives that may or may not pan out in the near term. But if you looked at the Lunar Lander Challenge, we have multiple companies now that have ended up with the second tier prize. This is there are things that are indeed happening. And basically what it comes down to is your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to find a way to make constructive trouble, to help make things happen, in a sense, be like coin the line, this disruptive wetware tech that ends up making a difference in what's happening. Now, from your vantage point, how assuming most of you are mixed up one way or another with the university, the question that comes in is what can be done at this point? One of the first things is finding out what is the connection between your university and the space business. Find out who's publishing and bringing in research money related to space-related endeavors, and make sure they know who you are. And if your university has no funding currently, start your own research project. You can go through and convince your department that you're willing to do the legwork with respect to applying for the grant. Universities understand money, and the people that get things done. If you take advantage of that fact, even the most skeptical folks that you may run into in the bureaucracy will say, "Okay, you're willing to charge? How about it? Maybe we can help you out a little bit." The net effect is that you can take an organization that seemingly may be indifferent or potentially modestly hostile to it, to something happening, and turn it around and at least get them to question, well, maybe something could be happening there. One of the things that results here, or basically where you end up, is you have to basically learn how to make things happen. This isn't an exercise in just trying to offer up an aphorism. The difference between a idea that or a notion that just ends up as that, a party conversation or an interesting deal, is oftentimes the willingness of an individual to invest their time to breathe life into an idea. It's an exercise in a suspension of disbelief, if you will, which requires a personal investment of your enthusiasm and willingness to actually ask the question, what does it take to make this real? From my vantage point, what can I actually do? Now, the situation that I speak from, there's a curious author you might have heard of, Hunter Thompson, who makes the argument, I believe the line goes, I hesitate to recommend sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but it's always worked for me. In my particular case, I've gone through, and what I'm telling you is what I did. Okay, I ended up, as a consequence of this sort of efforts at the university, I ended up with a fully funded graduate program before I had my undergraduate degree. In a department at the University of Maryland that was profoundly skeptical about anything that either wasn't a helicopter or had wings, strangely enough. Now, the other fun things that you can go off and do is, establish, some connections with professional societies. If you're not already a member, whether or not it's the AIAA, IEEE, those are the usual suspects in the engineering world. But there are professional societies in the business world, arts world, whatever academic background you're coming from. There are some number of professional groups that are associated with it, and by engaging with them and encouraging them to be a part of the discussion of what is the future you'd like to see come to pass, you are actually helping to move the process forward. Because arguably, to the extent to which a movement is successful, it increasingly comes to mirror the demographics of the society in which it's drawn from. Hence, if you've got a group that's just a bunch of aerospace engineers, you're missing, you're missing a rather substantial set of demographics from the rest of the society. One of the various things that you can do is if you venture out to things like the NSS website, what you'll see is there's opportunities coming up for things like the International Space Development Conference, which ends whether or not it's 500 to 1,000 attendees. I had invited my first cousin to show up in Orlando, and she took me aside later on and said, "Gary, there's something fundamentally different here. There's all these people that are running around talking about space stuff, and they're either actually doing it, or it's something that they're planning on doing in the near term." And this is, you just introduced me to Buzz Aldrin. I'm sorry. It was cute. At one social occasion, they told my cousin, hey, see the elderly gentleman that just came walking in the room? Why don't you run up and give him a kiss? I'll tell you who he is. Interesting twist. But the point is that the International Space Development Conferences are increasingly becoming an environment of individuals that are very much involved in helping make things happen in space. Some of the other twists. NSS basically functions as kind of a big tent organization with respect to space advocacy. There are a collection of other groups. There's the Moon Society, which happens to be an affiliate of NSS, just as it says. There's the Mars Society, there's the Space Frontier Foundation. There's a host of other organizations at different levels, which are all a part of the greater and hopefully increasingly cooperating space community. This is an integral part of what it ends up taking to make things happen in those regards. And I strongly encourage you, to not only check out what NSS is doing, but check out things like the Space Frontier Foundation's website, the American Astronautical Society, the whole host of them, and you'll see a lot of the links off of the NSS website. What I would strongly encourage you to do, though, is have a bit of, try to develop a bit of a focused plan to this. Figure out what it is, some aspect of the space endeavors that you particularly care about. And see if there's a research interest or some twist that you can identify. And then take it from the point of looking into who controls the policy on that, who the actors are, and what's the critical path of the research or action that's required on that. However small or large your notion is, lay out something that you can do, something that's within your power that you can do that can make a difference to following that path. Interestingly enough, things tend to snowball in those regards. We're, in the end, what really matters is what you actually build or get done. Sorry, PowerPoint presentations are not an end product. They're never intended to be, whether or not you call them PowerPoints or the more ancient among us, view graphs. It's an interesting deal, and what I would counsel you to do in those regards is try and take action to control your own destiny in those regards. My first day of college, I went in to see the esteemed chairman of the Aerospace Engineering Department at the University of Maryland, a man by the name of Dr. John Anderson, an expert, one of the foremost experts in aerodynamics. And I explained to him what it was that I wanted to do for a living, for a career. That I wanted to help provide for space development in earnest, help build large space structures, help build space stations. Then he looked at me and said, Gary, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you're never going to get a paying job in the space business, so you might as well figure that out now. I explained to him that I had to acknowledge a position, but I didn't happen to agree with it. And I left his office and I enrolled in graduate school in the first semester of freshman year. And went on from there. Arguably, that was probably the best thing he could have said to me from the standpoint that he was trying to say, there is no short path. If you want to do what you want to do, you're going to have to be some number of sigmas out there. You're going to have to go to inordinate lengths. It isn't something that's going to arrive as an opportunity on your doorstep. And what I would encourage you to think of today is, when you leave this room, what can you do in terms of some constructive step, however modest, to take your personal agenda forward as to helping to make things happen. What I try to lay out in those regards is a set of things, loosely put, there's no trouble with them to start with. And I'd like to sort of venture through this and, get into some discussion as to where you folks may be coming from and how we can, make things work even better. Certainly from the standpoint of making sure that your resumes and related information are in the SEDS database is a win for all concerned. I think we need to I think one of the challenges that SEDS has is to be able to work with NSS and the other space advocacy groups and the companies directly involved so that we can better make use of that information and get the word out to who's really interested. There is a scholarship activity. At this point, my apologies, I didn't fix the date on this. We have an annual scholarship to ISU. The deadline is like February, I believe. But please go out to the website and check it out. That represents a significant opportunity, and there are other scholarship opportunities that should be emerging on the NSS website soon in those regards. One of the things that is coming up is the blitz, the legislative blitz for the Space Exploration Alliance is actually, it is February, and that should be 2010. I was guilty of not running the search on this slide. That's an activity which has a collection of folks getting together, taking discussion to different representatives, offices, both on the House and Senate side. It represents an opportunity to talk with both with the different congressmen, in some cases with them directly, in some cases with their staffers, and with the different committees that are involved on a legislative basis. And another opportunity to intersect with people from all over the country that end up getting involved in these activities. I heartily recommend it. And you know, one of the interesting things that was striking about this, really a story. I had one staffer explain to me that his boss was basically indifferent with respect to space-related endeavors, but there was something that hung him up. For some reason, NASA was the only government agency that had people coming in on their own dime suggesting that more money should go to the funded programs, for which they had no benefit or intersection with. And he said, I'm sorry, anytime you have something like that, we have to pay attention to it. There's something weird going on. Okay? So the notion that this is just, this is an academic exercise, or just an opportunity to have a good time in Washington, which it certainly is that. But it actually is something where you'll be talking to people that are making decisions on a day in and day out basis, affecting things that you happen to care about. The notion that you can help provide the source material by which they have to draw on to make decisions. It actually can make a difference in those regards. The notion of the International Space Development Conference, the next one's coming up in 2010. After this, there'll be, as part of your external relations work here, maybe work here in SEDS, there'll be a discussion of some of the specifics of involvement and how we can make it even more of a valuable effort cooperatively between SEDS and ISDC. We look forward to anyone that cares to be involved with that. How many of you folks have had the opportunity to go out to the Space Ambassador site? How many folks know what's on the line if you sign up? Okay, now see these people that have their hands up? The Space Ambassadors deal is interesting. Virgin Galactic, and Space Adventures, and the Navstar space training facilities, and a number of other folks that are involved in the commercial space arena, think that it's a real good idea that the folks that are interested in space advocacy, take a leading role in motivating the discussion of what's the future we would like to see come to pass and what role space may have in it. To that end, there is the Space Ambassadors program is going to have has a series of flight assignments, including space on Spaceship 2 with Virgin Galactic, for which the folks that develop the best scores as participants in the program by the presentations that they give around the country. And there'll be a more developed set of rules that will be accessible from the website in short order. I would say it's a real safe bet that you'll see more material out there before the end of the first week in December. What's going to end up happening is that we're going to be handing out flight assignments. The deal is that if you end up, whatever individual wins or ends up with a flight assignment, say for the Virgin Galactic seat, they'll be asked to write up about their experiences and be part of moving the activities forward. So it represents a very real opportunity, and it's really independent of the level that you're going through in which communities you're reaching out to. We're also going to have participants At ISTC 2010, we'll be running a best of set of presentations to try and hone the messages in those regards. So I strongly encourage everyone to sign up. It doesn't cost anything, and should you choose to become involved, we'll be the flight assignments will be made. Unfortunately, I'm not eligible. However, I did take the opportunity of ordering the president of Virgin Galactic and saying, if I get to sign off on a flight assignment for somebody, I need to make sure it's safe. And, maybe I need to check it out. He didn't say no. So I'm still working that angle. As you can see, I'm no particular stranger to following my own advice in those regards. The notion of what you do in terms of your thesis work, again, another way to torment your universities into doing constructive things, like a topic that intersects with something that might make a difference with respect to space endeavors. And you can get a lot of encouragement and additional resources from other venues if you do so. Reading the Committee Human Spaceflight Commission report, absolutely. When the folks that are involved there, they come from many different perspectives, but as I alluded to earlier, have more than a clue about what's going on at a number of levels. Going through and leveraging your involvement in SEDS to make connections to other organizations and other people in the space business becomes invaluable. As I said, that's it's what worked for me in those regards. Going through and joining NSS ends up being another way to have an intersection with things and broaden the community of folks that you're in contact with, and quite frankly, consider the other organizations as well. If you're graduating, there's a deal with NSS where there's a free one-year membership. Different things to take advantage of, but see what you can do that's real. Basically, what this sort of comes down to in terms of key heuristics, you need to come to some understanding of what you know and what you don't, and work the angles in those regards. For me, one of the difficult things to come to terms with was the realization that I could fail. But where I eventually just came to understand was that was a given. What was really interesting and special was the extent to which I actually succeeded, or more broadly put, to the extent to which we all succeed in our endeavors to extend our economic sphere on the planet. It's a win for all concerned. Unless you've got a seriously negative view of your species, which there's a limited number of folks running around the planet that basically think we're fundamentally a cancer. It needs to be eradicated. Short of that, there's very few folks that would argue that providing for a positive future is a bad thing. And, we may say, what are the angles now? Why is this relevant? Things like, you may have heard of the notion of the space-based solar power stuff. That's a notion where, if it actually works, could be fun from an economic standpoint, could be fundamentally transformative in terms of how we deal with large-scale power generation, not just in the States, but around the world. That's a pretty big ticket deal. When you start talking about being able to make use of resources off planet, you've probably heard the line, get yourself a nice, small nickel iron asteroid that's 98% pure, has more metals transformative. It can alter the future that comes to pass. And so, you know, there's a line, you know, you need to have no unnecessary sense of self-limitation. There are lots of folks that will tell you that, you know, you don't have a clue, that you don't understand the complexity, that it's that what you're doing is impossible. One of the best lines that I have in those regards is there's one of the traditional talking heads on National Public Radio. It's a man from Dr. Park from the University of Maryland Physics and Astronomy Department, who is profoundly skeptical about anything having to do with manned space flight and a lot of other things. And I had to go into his office and ask him for some resources for the Maryland Alliance for Space Colonization for our annual conference. And he got infuriated and spent 2.5 hours lecturing me on why what it was that we were trying to do was utterly impossible. And didn't I understand, you know, all the different aspects of things? And then he offered up all the resources of the department that he really wanted. He was happy. You know, so the sort of the moral of that story is that oftentimes even the most skeptical or at times even cynical critics, when you talk to them and figure out what it is that really matters to them and the future they'd like to see come to pass, chances are, the gulf between your opinions and theirs may not be nearly as extreme as you might imagine. This notion of success through cooperation is the path to success. NSS isn't going to do it alone as a as a little niche organization that's a club for over 15,000 of our friends. Sorry, it doesn't. It's not. In the end, that's not going to necessarily make the difference. Perhaps apologies to Margaret Mead in those regards. I argue she's quite right in making the assertion that to never doubt the power of a small involved minority to change the future of the world. Indeed, it's the only thing it ever has. But we have to take it further. It's insufficient just to have a discussion amongst ourselves in this little community. If we're working about the business, making the future we want to see come to pass, we have to find ways to engage. Now, one of the things, Will Watson, the executive director of the Space Frontier Foundation, and I gave this talk last year at SpaceVision. And one of the things that Will and I agreed to was an interesting game. Whenever we cross paths, he has to have a better story than I do as to what constructed troubles we were. I would argue that perhaps, as a rule for those of us that have an interest in space advocacy, ask yourself the question, what have you done today? Or what's the story of what you're working on that's actually going to make a difference? Because it's in that story, that enthusiasm, that interest where you're personally invested, that it's going to end up being what makes a difference in terms of the roles that you'll play and what you can do to make things happen. Now, I've spent a number of minutes here going on about different perspectives. In terms of setting meteorites, does anybody have any questions or thoughts that is this do you think I'm trying to blow smoke up your tails? What's going on here?
speed of meteorites. They're not very high, so it seems like you're trying to.
Well, you want asteroids, not meteorites, typically. And you're, whether or not it's a nickel iron or a carbonaceous chondrite, or any number of other things. Now, if you happen to have an interest in astronomy and either an inclination to observation work or an inclination to data mining, rumor has it that there's a whole bunch of data that corresponds to the L4 and L5 regions in space where there may be some accretion materials. There may even be a substantial number of small asteroids in the vicinity because the nature of the energy we tend to collect it. So sure, there's going to be a different constituency. There's an argument that some will be closer to snowballs. But you have to take an interesting instrument to find something that is predominantly dark.
So you think that as far as mining asteroids, right now, something that they're using at least to go towards that end is possibilities of an asteroid hitting Earth. And that scares people when you get to thinking about possibly mission toward an asteroid or learn more about an asteroid. So what do you think about that approach to the asteroid basically is going to bring positive resources to the Earth, but we're using sort of the fact that it could possibly kill our civilization as its motivation to study these asteroids and actually visit them.
Two things immediately come to mind. You had any experience with dihydrogen monoxide? It's a highly dangerous substance. It has been responsible for a tremendous number of deaths amongst humans. And used irresponsibly, it can have extraordinarily negative effects. You get the joke there. There's a different way of looking at things, and you tell the whole picture. The right thing to do is to sell both the good side of being able to make use of the resources, as well as, guess what? We know, all you have to do is look up at the moon. Okay, we know what's coming. There's no argument there. You look at the, one of the more wonderful things about the ability to establish a relationship between ground truth and false color imaging and remote sensing deals. You can see a large number of the impacts on the Earth when you look at it at the right frequency. So, the fact that the Earth has natural systems which do a lot better job of covering up, things than the moon, is just, it becomes an opportunity for things to be to draw on discussion, and there's always going to be multiple reasons why someone chooses to do something.
I just have one more.
Sure.
Like you said about the transformative possibilities of mining resources, that nowadays it's all about sustainable energy, but in sustainable resources, you have limited amount of resources on Earth. It's kind of weird that, I guess Congress and leadership right now has noticed that there's unlimited amount of resources in space. And the same transformative thing that happened when we became an agricultural society that freed us from nomadic lives could possibly happen when we become a space mining society, which will free us from resources. Basically right now the existence of the third world is dependent on limited resources. Everyone can't live at the same level as the United States, so there has to be a third world. If there was unlimited resources, third world would be a thing of the past.
Absolutely. Basically, it's, what you're referring to is the transformation from the zero-sum game where anybody else's loss is someone else's gain to a situation where you're dealing with an option on potentially unlimited energy, resources and area. That's why I'm in the business. Yes.
Your key objective says people living and working in space, but if you talk to NASA, they're all about basically a government program where you have an outpost and people go there, do some science, and then go home. Could you talk a little bit about people being born in space and say going to grade school?
Well, a couple of things. One, as you can see, I was a NASA graduate student researcher, and I have been involved with NASA in various capacities throughout my professional career. So, that's my own particular set of rose-colored glasses. But here, what you're describing is the limitations of a broken company line at the moment. This has come up. One of the classic things at the second Vision for Space Exploration Conference that was held in Houston. Pete Wharton, now the Center Director at Ames, was leading a panel discussion at the end of how we essentially reestablish relevance of the vision of space exploration to a new generation of young engineers and scientists, if you will. And the point was raised that if the future that we're trying to sell is that we can spend the next 10 to 20 years figuring out how a few people can hang out for a couple of weeks on the moon, and that is option A, or we're offering an opportunity for folks to get involved in constructing a future where they could be a part of going to the moon and extending our economic sphere on planet through the solar system. And what's somebody going to be interested in? A or B? I don't think it takes a whole lot of insight to figure out that the answer there is B. And it's recognized, I think, within the leadership of NASA that the company line has to fundamentally change in those regards. If you look at what was actually agreed to and published as the objectives associated with the U.S. National U.S. Space Policy initially, it came up as the Vision for Space Exploration. There's approximately 10 different points of which it makes action. Human civilization and the extension on the planet is one of the fundamental goals. So the notion is that NASA as an organization is growing up in those regards. It is difficult to, though, for any bureaucracy, if what they can advocate, what they can take forward is limited or circumscribed by the procurement exercises that are funded at the moment. If that's all they can talk about, if that's all they can respond to, react to, and work towards, the schism that you identified will never be fixed. And will be limited, the effectivity of those organizations will become limited, will remain limited in content. What you will discover, though, is there's an awful lot of folks that have been mixed up with NASA over the years and are mixed up there now that do have more than a clue about how things could, and should fit together. And we need to make it possible and ensure that it is part of the mission of NASA to lead wherever it makes sense, to support wherever possible, and quite frankly, know when to get out of the way. Questions? Thoughts on that? The question for you is this relevant in terms of where you how could this be made more relevant to you folks?
One thing with the push for space development and exploration is that we could get past the It's like basically when Columbus came to the New World, he didn't come here because he wanted to live in America. He came here searching for gold, searching for something that could benefit, you know, the society back in Europe. I think that's kind of the problem right now. A lot of people see it that way. They see that we want to go to space because we want to live on the moon.
Well, that's why, particularly with the Space Ambassadors Program, we're stressing we want people engaged in the question of what's the future we would like to see come to pass and what role space can play in it. I think that's absolutely our message.
All I'm saying is the argument that we don't even know Earth that well and we want to explore other worlds. I mean, I've actually got that argument a lot. I mean, we don't even know what's on the Earth, around it, completely. For example, like in the ocean, we've never seen the bottom of it. And what we say is that
Well, first and foremost,
why explore further if we don't even know our own planet completely?
first and foremost, when you think of the Earth, what vision comes to mind? What picture?
The Earth.
From space.
From space, yeah.
Okay, all right. Now, there's the next line is if you've got your nose pressed up against a very large concrete wall, your ability to have some sense of perspective on it is totally rather limited. But if you back off from it a bit, you start asking yourself the question, perhaps you might be able to walk around it or go over it. But what is that wall from 100 miles up? In the grand scheme of things. You know, you could argue it's a different perspective. Now, what space offers us is an ability to understand and gain a different set of perspectives on the systems that are integral to the functioning of our planet. That, you know, the cradle which sustains us as a species. We have, you know, as we're becoming increasingly aware, the service contract on this particular spaceship has run out. We either have to figure out how to pick up that service contract and learn how to manage our interaction with the natural systems of the planet to preserve, preserve the environment as we would like it to be, or it will change. Perhaps driven ever more so by our inputs. But we know throughout history it has changed even of its own accord. So, you know, there's a set of systems there that we have to be a party to understanding, and space offers us you know, a variety of very valuable perspectives in terms of understanding. It's not a panacea. Quite frankly, you know, without a substantive growth in societal maturity, we're perhaps betting on, you know, Larry Niven's line, I guess, you know, we're breeding for luck. No other explanation explains why we still exist. And having that